I'm the principal manager for the mobility research team in BT. First thing I should say is that I'm not an expert on a lot of the technologies that are going to be discussed at this conference, so I'm here to learn. But I'm also here to share our experiences. And I work very closely with some of our colleagues, by the way, who some of which I've mentioned here, who are actually experts, and pretty much a lot of them you would probably know from other areas, and they've helped me pull together this information to share with you. In terms of my background and why I'm here, as I said, mobility research is the area that I currently lead. That spans from all of our pretty much radio, core network, services research, primarily focused on 5G technologies. And the reason why we're keeping a close eye, of course, on virtualization, software-based networking, and of course, the whole journey towards automation is because we believe that it's absolutely key that we build automation in the network if we want to, if you like, fulfill the expectations of 5G. If we want the ability to serve customers very dynamically, very rapidly, with the flexibility and the agility and the complexity that that implies in the network, we absolutely need this area to be successful. So the areas I'm going to cover today are pretty much what we believe is our journey towards automation. Other operators might have different stories, but this is pretty much how we see it evolving. I'll give a couple of examples of where we are in that journey. Obviously, there are many more activities in this space, but I thought it would be good to cover some of the most representative examples of what we're doing, and a bit of a recap on what do we believe are the challenges still ahead of us, and which again maybe other operators in the room might share, and just wrap up on conclusions. So what do we believe is the journey? So we firmly believe that we need to start at the bottom, and that's pretty much what we're doing. This is pretty much what our UK network looks like, a set of access or last mile technologies, obviously fixed, which is our traditional business. And for those of you who don't know, we've just bought a couple of years ago the largest UK mobile operator, which provides us with an awful lot of infrastructure in the mobile space as well. That tends to feed into our nationwide backbone network, which we call 21C. And of course, as you would expect with any operator, we have different layers of aggregation. And obviously, IT data centers, which tend to be very centralized. And of course, traditionally, and we still have obviously a lot of legacy in our network, as you would expect. We have had a lot of physical network functions spread across the network. A lot of the functionality obviously tending to be centralized for obvious reasons, again, scalability and so on. And pretty much we're evolving that. How are we evolving it? Well, two ways, I guess. First, obviously, we're building, if you like, reusable infrastructure at the IT domain level, and I'll talk a bit later about our network cloud program in order to explain how we do that. We will start with a first level of distribution towards the first roughly 100 nodes across the network, and we will be looking to further expand that as and when the needs of the different services, in particular 5G, but maybe others, may require further distribution. We refer to that as, if you like, our evolution to a fully programmable network. And that's fully programmable from the sense that we will have reusable infrastructure at the different layers of the network that we will be able to reuse and dynamically use for different services. And of course, the connectivity between the different nodes will also be programmable, which implies, of course, that we need the right interfaces and the right APIs into those physical or virtualized network functions that enable us to dynamically reconfigure the network as the service requires. Step number 2 is pretty much moving on to the functional layer. So we firmly believe that we need, if you like, the convergence that is going to bring the economies of scale of bringing our fixed and mobile services together. So I mentioned the Network Cloud Platform program earlier. I'll come back to that later as well, but pretty much that is our NFVI platform across the network, which will enable us to deploy all the different network functions, virtual network functions moving forward that we will require. I've mentioned here quite a few 5G ones because, again, that's closer to my heart and the work that we do in the team. But of course, that doesn't have to be just 5G. It will fixed-only networks. It will be, whether it's firewalling, WAN accelerator, CPE functions on it, and of course, any applications which may be from the operator itself, like us, or might be from third parties. And we're, of course, together with the Network Cloud Platform, we're building the VIM layer, or the Virtual Infrastructure Manager, which pretty much abstracts the view of the resources available from the network and exposes that to the upper layers. And of course, we will have SDN controllers, most likely on a per domain basis, which again can present the right interfaces, the right APIs to the upper layers for dynamic configuration. Step number 3 is where we move on to the orchestration domain. And I guess it's important to highlight we've got pretty much 3 principles around that. The first one is that it's got to be driven by models. So models represent the information, the catalog, the templates, if you like, that we're going to be using across the network. And as I said, that's pretty much stored in a catalog. And it's also policy-driven, and obviously policies identify the rules of the actions that need to be taken under certain conditions. So those 2 are absolutely key. The third principle, and I will come back to that a little later in the presentation, is about recursiveness in the orchestration. We don't believe in a single God orchestrator that knows everything about the entire network, and the way we're architecting our network is that we will have a specialist orchestrators on a per domain basis, and we will have obviously higher level orchestration on a hierarchical manner, effectively, overseeing different services end to end. And the final, or the icing on the cake, and where we believe we need to go to, and I guess most people in this room agree, is to the full automation model. And what we believe full automation means is, of course, we already have an awful lot of telemetry and events coming from the network. We are already, and I will give some examples later, feeding that into service assurance engines, which can already provide remediation actions, if you like, for what to do under certain circumstances. But a lot of that needs to be policy-driven. Again, back to the point I made earlier, it's about defining the actions that need to be taken upon certain conditions. But there's also the applicability of artificial intelligence and machine learning for those algorithms to learn over time and become more efficient about the way we act upon certain events. And of course, just to close the loop, there is a fulfillment process potentially, whereby, depending on the decision that has been taken by the engine, we will make some either configuration changes or a scale up, scale down, whatever the action happens to be. Another key point to make about the full automation model is that we believe that, again, there's going to be a need for per domain closed-loop automation. So certain, again, orchestrators within their domain and certain solutions will know best what to do under certain conditions within that particular area. And of course, there will then be end-to-end service solutions as well. So in essence, a little bit like when we've talked about orchestration being hierarchical and recursive, we do believe that that should be the case for closed-loop automation as well. One last thing to say, I guess, before I move on to the examples, is that the policies, as I said earlier, being very key. We need to marry up the business policies together with the commercial policies, together with the network and the operations. And again, we believe that it is very important that the catalog, if you like, provides a comprehensive view of all that and a cohesive view between them that allows us to make, again, the right decisions to act upon certain conditions on the network. So on to a couple of examples. The first one is referring to our global services organization. So for those of you who don't know, BT is active in over 100 countries as part of our global services organization. And we have a set of products we call Cloud of Clouds. What we do there is effectively combine a global MPLS network with, as I said, presence in a number of countries, which allows us to bring together our own data center services, as well as a range of collaboration services, together with the own customer data centers, which we believe is increasingly important to bring together, if you like, different cloud services from both BT and the customer. But not just that, of course, third-party services as well, and we've got an increasing number of partners out there, and that's pretty much why we call this the cloud of clouds. We also bring applications from, again, from both BT and third parties, and we integrate all of that, obviously, with the customers' branches or offices or customer premise, effectively, and the end devices from the users, as well as, of course, internet access and services. So where are we on the journey towards automation in this cloud of clouds vision? So first of all, we can already dynamically provision service provider interconnects and high capacity links effectively to our partner data centers as and when required. That's one important aspect of it. Another key thing that we've already done, we've got over 20 NFV-enabled cloud service nodes, and that allows us to both deploy VNFs, or virtual network functions, from BT, but also from third parties or potentially our customers. So if you need a firewall or a WAN accelerator, we can deploy those as virtual network functions in one of those cloud service nodes in the network. Another aspect where, again, we've already got the ability to support dynamic configuration of VPNs, and we've added a layer of SD-WAN technology to our entire MPLS platform to enable us to do that. And the final piece, which, not the final piece yet, sorry, another one is the virtualization of the CPE. So you might have equipment on the customer side, and we already have solutions which are effective, fully virtualized solutions on the customer premise that allow us to deploy VNFs on the customer and remotely manage those services for them. And as I said, the final piece, which I will expand on a little bit on the next few slides, is about a recent announcement that we made just before Christmas, I believe that was, on our service and network automation platform, which is called Snap. Just a few principles of that platform and what that means. So the ultimate goal is to provide orchestration across all these different data center services. So as I mentioned, we've got BT, we've got third parties, we've got customer data centers. The aim of this engine and this automation platform is to have an end-to-end view and the ability to orchestrate services end-to-end. That, of course, provides us and the customer with an end-to-end view of a particular application, which we believe is absolutely key. One principle behind it is that it's built out of open source software components, and we use industry standard languages like YAML models, and we also use Tosca for service definitions. Effectively what happens, and I will explain a little bit later, is that pretty much the control commands, which in previous technologies might have taken weeks to ripple through the system, can now basically cascade through BT systems in minutes. And finally, one interesting point about the way we can serve our customers and help our customers by doing this is that we've built centers of excellence where experts from all parts of the life cycle of a service, and that's pretty much what we call the DevOps approach, can actually be involved in supporting a customer with that end-to-end visibility of the life cycle management of the service that we're providing to them. So just a couple of examples, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on the Snap architecture, but just to highlight maybe and again remind you of some of the things I mentioned earlier. So as I said, this is our Snap platform, obviously a portal towards the customer, which is what will enable them to order new services and get self-service and provisioning from us. And some key elements of the architecture being the catalog, as I mentioned earlier, that will contain all the models, as well as the policies that will drive the entire orchestration through the system. As I mentioned earlier, we use Tosca at the service definitions at the orchestration layer. We've got a workflow engine. I'll move on to a little bit later. We have root cause analysis functionality that enables us to take telemetry from the network and extract useful information about what is the root of the problem. And obviously remediation actions that need to be taken, and I'll explain that a little bit later as well. Obviously the bottom layer is pretty much looking at an extensible a number of plugins as and when we get new physical or virtual network functions that we need to control in the network. You would expect this bottom layer to expand. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we've got virtualization infrastructure managers and also SDN controllers controlling different IT or connectivity resources on the network. So just a couple of examples on how we, if you like, use this platform. So the first one being fulfillment. The customer will come in and based on the catalog will pretty much order a service. What needs to happen is that the Tosca orchestrator would receive that order and using the models and the policies in the catalog will, in conjunction with the workflow engine and with the minimum difference engine, work out what are the actions or the set of steps that we need to take in the network to get from the current state to the desired state. Once that's being worked out, pretty much what will happen is that there will be, as we were saying, dictated by the workflow, there will be a set of actions, some of which will be provisioning and some of which will be configuration. You may have to spin up a new VNF, you may have to allocate a set of IT resources to spin up a virtual machine. You may have to reconfigure your SDN controller to set up some sort of new connectivity through the network. And as I was saying earlier, we will use technologies like Yang, which I've mentioned earlier, and also NetConf where available. That's one example. The next one is how we, again, envisage that this helps with self-service. So the ambition is to give the customer more visibility about their services. So what we do is enable them through the portal to have access and exposure effectively of some of their capabilities. In this particular case, we expect that via our SDN controller, we're enabling the customer to potentially change. It might be access control lists on their VPN or whatever it is the configuration they want to apply onto their particular view of the network. And we think that's absolutely key. And the third example, and last on this area, is how we perform dynamic assurance. This is obviously an evolving journey, but it's pretty much recapping on what I was saying earlier. We've got events and telemetry coming from the network into the root cause analysis engine. By use of analytics and increasingly artificial intelligence, we will be digesting, if you like, all of those events, filtering through the events, and identifying the root cause of the problem. The remediation engine will then be, if you like, suggesting or recommending a set of actions that need to be taken based on, as I was saying earlier, the policies and applying the models that are reflected in the catalog. And of course, that workflow will imply that there is a set of actions which again may imply reconfiguration, spinning up resources, or whatever the action needs to be. So that was the first example on the as I said, the Snap platform for our global services domain. If I now move to the UK, more centric approach, and again, similar picture at the bottom here, which shows pretty much what our UK network looks like. We've got a program called Network Cloud, and I know that other operators have their own, if you like, equivalent names and programs, but it's pretty much about looking at transforming our exchanges into what we call programmable network nodes. As I was saying earlier, at the moment our major exchanges are probably between 5 and 10 across the network. We're looking at obviously deploying network cloud functionality, not just at that layer, but also in the next layer of distribution, which is our metro nodes, which is over 100 nodes roughly. And just coming back to 5G for a second, and the way obviously we believe this is absolutely key and crucial. As you all know, of course, 5G is based on, if you like, virtualization technologies, but not just that. Actually, we believe that in order to deploy things like network slicing, for instance, in 5G, if I put that as a question, we need the flexibility to be able to deploy different functions in different parts of the network depending on the needs of the service. And that's where we think this is pretty much enabling us to do that. If I need ultra-low latency from a particular service, I might need to bring my user plane functions closer to the edge of the network. If that's not required, I may centralize them. So that dynamic flexibility, if you like, that network cloud is going to offer us is going to underpin, if you like, a lot of our 5G investment and a lot of the opportunities for the future. Not much more to say about this one. As I said, it's not just about 5G. We're also looking at how we distribute our content delivery networks. As you might know, again, we have a content and a TV service primarily in the UK. So we have got a lot of content caches throughout the network, and we need to, again, decide what is the optimal placement for those. So again, we're looking at Network Cloud to be the platform that enables us to very dynamically and very flexibly distribute that content across the network. Just to wrap up and complete the presentation, I just wanted to talk a bit about the challenges that we see we have ahead of us. So first of all, when looking at how we integrate these new solutions into our network, I'm guessing that the rest of the operators in the room agree that none of us are greenfield, unfortunately. Therefore, we need to, and we want to reuse a lot of the existing assets. We want to obviously evolve what we have, but we cannot afford getting rid of it or chucking it away overnight and replacing it by something new. So pretty much what we need is a componentized architecture. We need solutions which are modular and enable us to integrate the new with the old, and obviously the old to be evolved over time. And the only way to do that is pretty much by, as I said, making it modular and componentized, and obviously an API-driven integration that enables us to, if you like, put the entire jigsaw puzzle together. We also think that we need to change, and I believe, again, we're not unique in this position, change the way we buy and consume technology, if you like, from our traditional supply chain. We want to be disruptive. We think we need to find new ways. We believe open source is probably one of the key ways to do that, which is why we're very active on some of the open source programs out there. And again, we believe that operators need to be actively driving those programs to make sure our requirements are taken into account. And we believe that's pretty much where the standard architectures of the future are going to come from. So that's the first area. The second one, coming back to the points about automation, we believe we're at the starting point of this, okay? And we believe that is probably the right place to start, which is how do we automate the way we fulfill new orders, as I was explaining earlier. However, we have a long way to go in terms of how do we monitor live performance, how do we make sure that we apply artificial intelligence to minimize the number of manual tickets that we raise in the network, and gradually have much more automation compared to, if you like, manual intervention. And it's not going to be a big bang approach. It's not going to be happening overnight. It's going to be a journey, again, to get to that point. And one point that my colleagues asked me I needed to highlight here, specifically on one point of the architecture where we believe there is a little bit of lack of maturity and it's a little bit of a call for action to try and remediate that, which is in a Mano architecture, element managers and VNF managers are a little bit confused. We don't believe there is enough maturity in the market whereby there is a common way of actually integrating those elements together in the architecture. And there are different approaches by different vendors, which is pretty much not very consistent across the entire architecture. And of course, this is a very heterogeneous system, so the more maturity and the more consistency that we have across the components, we absolutely believe that that's needed. And last but not least, coming back to again, one of the points I made earlier, at the moment, most of the solutions out there tend to take the assumption that there is a single NFV orchestrator. There is some concept of recursiveness out there, but in essence, it does require actually the higher level orchestrator to have quite a detailed knowledge of what the underlying network services are and potentially the composite components of that network service. We believe in layers of abstraction, and that's what we mean by recursiveness. And we believe that a domain orchestrator is the specialist orchestrator that knows about all of the components within that domain, but then it needs to, again, present that as a single consumable element, if you like, to the upper layers. And we believe there is more maturity that is required in that space. So again, we do believe that that's an area where we, as an industry, if you like, we need to come together to solve that problem. And finally, just to wrap up, we know it's a long journey, but we do believe it's a journey worthwhile taking. We are taking a bottom-up approach. Of course, this is not saying it's going in serious. Of course, there is an awful lot of work going on at the different layers, across different platforms and different domains, all happening in parallel to achieve this vision. Hopefully I've given a couple of examples that bring to life, if you like, how we're undertaking that journey and the things that we're doing across the business. And as I was saying on the last slide, we do believe there is obviously more maturity required in industry. We need solutions which are modular and enable us to mix the old and the new and integrate it accordingly. We need automation tools to evolve and continue to mature. And that recursiveness in the orchestration needs to be in the DNA of the architecture as opposed to an afterthought. But yeah, we can't afford to fail. I mean, I'm here talking as a consumer, if you like, of the automation platforms. I don't believe our 5G ambitions can be fulfilled without this, and I'm sure that many other services require automation to handle the complexity and the flexibility that we need in the future. So thank you very much for having me.
All right.
How long?
It was quite a talk. Questions? We have one up there. Vadim is very good at this already. Submitted some yesterday. How long will it take BT to go to full automation?
Yeah, I'm sure nobody was expecting me to answer that question. It's more of a story, and when it's not even a yes or no answer. I don't think anybody could say we're done. You know, we're finished. So as we're saying, it's a journey. What I can say is that we are obviously at the very early stages of the journey, but we've done a lot of thinking up front to make sure that our vision is very clear, almost before we even start on that journey. Hopefully I've given some examples about how we want to gradually grow, and talking to our architects, I really think this is the right way to go. We were in a manual world a number of years ago, and we're not so manual anymore. But of course there is a hybrid, as usual. And I was mentioning tickets. It's quite interesting how we still need, and we will for quite some time, need to live in a hybrid model where some actions that do actually require manual intervention, and increasingly with the applicability of, again, you know, the machine learning, the AI technologies out there, we will be able to have less manual tickets, more automation. I guess the other thing to say is that in parallel to all this, the network is growing in complexity, which is obviously a never-ending, if you like, problem to solve. So again, speaking for myself in the 5G world, our ambition, and I've mentioned things like network slicing, is to actually over time grow the number of slices and the dynamic nature of those slices, which obviously goes hand in hand with the need for automation. So I think my answer to that would be never, because full is never achievable, if you like. But yeah, we need to continuously work on it, I think.
And you know, we always say this is our course toward the future. We never stop to say, okay, we've gotten there, and we're always looking, what's next? What's next? We're never satisfied with where we are, which is sort of natural. But sometimes I think it helps to stop and celebrate that we've made some milestones. I wanted to ask you a question. Earlier on when you talked about the journey, the layers of the journey, and the first mentioned recursive orchestration, but you said there is no God super top orchestrator. Yet on your last slide, when you talked about recursive orchestration, you said single...
there is an assumption of a single NFVO.
Single NFVO, yeah. Right. So
no, well, what I'm saying is that assumption is incorrect. Maybe I didn't make
Oh,
that clear.
oh,
So what I'm
okay.
saying is the problem we would like to highlight is that in industry there seems to be an underlying assumption that there is a single NFVO, and we disagree with that
Okay,
assumption.
all right.
Does that
So
make sense? Yeah.
now it makes it consistent. One little last question. Hopefully it won't go too long. When you talked about your cloud of clouds and your 3 levels of exchanges, you had about 10 COs, about 100 metros, and then some number of POPs. Short question, how many POPs and how are they different from metros?
1,200, I believe, is the latest number.
Oh, okay, so much closer.
And those tend to be, it's a mix of, in fixed line technologies, what we used to call our DSLAM or MSAN exchanges.
Okay.
So it tends to be the local exchange end of the network. So it's pretty much the first point of aggregation. I don't know if that
Great.
helps. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.